It is the year 1923. The world is supposed to be rebuilding after the Great War, but in Germany, the rubble isn't just in the streets. It's in the hearts and minds of its people. The Weimar Republic struggles to keep its footing as the economic collapse looms over every family. The value of the mark is vanishing by the hour. Prices are rising, but wages are stagnant, and the promises of a new, stable nation are fading fast. Otto Schmidt, a factory worker, had seen the promise of a better life in the post-war years. But now, as he walks through the doors of his home each night, the future looks more uncertain. The shelves are emptying faster than they can be filled. In 1914, Otto's family had saved enough to live comfortably. By 1923, their savings were barely enough to buy bread. The marks, once a symbol of wealth, were becoming paper. Literally and figuratively, that Anna's journey to the market was a journey into a new reality. The loaf of bread she had bought for a few marks a month ago now cost 10 times as much. And tomorrow, it would likely cost even more. The hyperinflation gripping Germany had stolen the value of their money, but more importantly, it was stealing their dignity. The German people had once been the backbone of Europe's economy. Now, they were left with nothing but empty wallets and the bitter taste of defeat as the cost of living skyrocketed. The streets of Berlin became a battleground for something more than just currency. The Weimar Republic was failing, and in its place, dangerous political ideologies were beginning to take root. Communists and fascists, each with their own vision for Germany's future, began to rally the disillusioned masses. The stability that democracy once promised was now a distant memory. The people no longer believed in their leaders, and the Schmidt household. The political struggle happening in the streets of Berlin was an unseen force. Otto and Anna watched the rallies on the newsreels, unsure what to make of the promises of a better tomorrow. They saw the promises of change, but at what cost? The future was becoming clearer. Germany would have to choose between the extremes. But would Otto and Anna be able to make that choice? Or would they, like so many others, be swept up in the chaos? At the factory, Otto saw the tension begin to build. The strikes were no longer about just better wages. They were about survival. The workers knew the system was broken, and as they walked out, the idea of turning to radical solutions began to feel less and less like a choice. The workers didn't just need a better government. They needed a future. The choices Otto and Anna Schmidt faced were not just personal. They were national. The war had ended, but Germany had entered a new fight, a fight for its soul. And in this battle, the street politics, the economic collapse, and the loss of faith in democracy would change everything. In a world where money no longer had value, would the people of Germany trade their ideals for power? Otto had always believed in the idea of progress, a better life, a better future for his family. But with each passing day, that dream seemed more and more like a distant memory. The workers were restless. The streets were alive with rage, and Otto had no answers. The war had ended, but the real struggle, the fight for survival in this new world, was just beginning. Anna had watched the rise of the inflation crisis with growing dread. What had once been a comfortable life was now slipping through her fingers like sand. The numbers in the savings book had lost all meaning. The reality was simple. They had no future. They had no security. The promise of peace seemed hollow when survival was a daily question. The streets of Berlin had become a battlefield not of soldiers, but of ideologies. Political groups, once fringe, were now demanding to be heard. The Weimar government was a broken shell, unable to hold the country together. The price of peace wasn't just money, it was trust. And in this new world, trust had evaporated, replaced by radical voices offering simple solutions to a complex problem. The promises of radical politics echoed in every corner of Germany. The streets filled with slogans of revolution, of rebuilding the nation through extreme measures. But for Otto, these promises felt like hollow words. How could anyone trust the future when the present was unraveling? The very fabric of democracy was being replaced by street politics, and Otto wondered if there was a way back from this. In just a few weeks, the Schmidt family had gone from owning a small home and living comfortably to facing the terrifying reality of imminent financial ruin. They had fought for peace, for a future, but now the collapse of Germany's economy had turned their hopes into dust. The marks they once saved now felt like nothing but paper, and the dream of a stable life vanished before their eyes. The street politics were no longer just a backdrop to the daily grind of life. They had become a real choice. For Otto, the battle was no longer about survival. It was about choosing which future to fight for. The promises of radical politics had taken root, but was this really the solution, or the beginning of something far more dangerous? Otto had to make a decision. Would he join the fight, or would he resist the growing tide of extremism? For Otto, the streets of Berlin had become a battlefield of ideologies. The fascists marched with pride, their voices booming in the air. They offered solutions, a way out of the darkness that had gripped Germany. But Otto knew the cost of power. He had witnessed the destruction that blind loyalty to a cause could bring. And yet, the silence of democracy was now more dangerous than the voices calling for revolution. Anna had always believed that peace was a reward for the suffering. But now, she realized it was something far more elusive. The world had changed overnight. The safety of their family was no longer a given. The dreams they had built through years of sacrifice and hard work, were now at risk. The question now wasn't just about surviving. It was about survival with dignity. And that was becoming harder with each passing day. Karl's words echoed in Otto's mind, each sentence a promise of something that felt impossible yet irresistible, a chance to restore what was lost. But there was a price. Otto knew. The radicals' vision for the future didn't just ask for loyalty. It demanded sacrifice. Would Otto's need to survive become a justification for joining forces with the very thing that had torn his nation apart? Anna didn't know where her husband had gone. The Otto she had married wasn't someone who would follow the call of radical leaders. He believed in democracy and hope. But now, with everything on the line, that hope was fading fast. The streets had changed, and so had Otto. The weight of his choices pressed on him. The road to power was not paved with idealism, but with the cold reality of survival. And in this moment, Otto wondered if he could afford to remain silent any longer. Otto was on the edge. The decision would define everything, his family, his future, and his soul. The question was simple. Would he take the step into a future controlled by those who promised power, or would he resist and fight for a peace that could never return? Otto felt the weight of his decision with every step he took. This wasn't just about supporting a movement. It was about securing a future. As he joined the crowd, he knew that this was not a decision that would only affect him. It would change everything for his family. But the question remained, was this the right path to take? When Otto returned home, his presence had changed. Anna could see it. The man she knew, the one who had always been hopeful, was now a part of something bigger. As Otto handed her the pamphlet, she understood what had transpired. The path Otto had chosen was not just about survival. It was a choice that had left their life, their home, on the edge of something unknown. The rallies were everywhere, filling the streets with an energy that Otto couldn't ignore. The promises of strength and unity were appealing, but there was something else. The rising tension felt like a storm waiting to break. And in the heart of that storm, Otto had made his choice. But was power enough to protect his family, or would it consume them all? The pressure was growing. Otto had already taken steps down the path of political involvement, but now it was becoming real. This wasn't just a decision anymore. It was a commitment. And the further Otto walked into this new world, the harder it became to see an easy way out. Anna couldn't understand. Otto's decision, though made with good intentions, had placed them on opposite sides. Their world was shifting, and Anna wasn't sure they could stay together in this new reality. Otto's choices, meant to protect the family, were now pulling them apart. Berlin was no longer the city of progress, and hope it once was. The streets had become the battleground for ideologies fighting for dominance. The political movements Otto had once seen as solutions were now dividing the very nation he called home. The chaos was more than just an external conflict. It was now part of the fabric of his life. The road ahead was unclear. Otto's choices had set him on a path he couldn't easily turn back from. The family he once dreamed of protecting was now caught in the same storm that raged through the streets of Berlin. Could he change the course of their future, or was he now a part of something that would swallow them whole? As the days passed, the political struggle in Berlin intensified. The promises of power, of stability, had drawn Otto in, but at what cost? The tension in their home mirrored the tension on the streets. Otto had chosen his path, but now it was Anna's turn to choose hers. And with each passing day, the choices were growing harder. The more Otto threw himself into the cause, the more he found himself consumed by it. The speeches, the rallies, the sense of belonging, all of it was intoxicating. But was it worth the cost? The further Otto stepped into movement, the more he felt the pull of something darker. The question no longer was about survival. It was about identity. Anna's concerns were not just about the future. They were about the present. The man she married was slipping away, replaced by someone she barely recognized. The streets of Berlin had become battlegrounds for ideologies, and Otto had chosen his side. But was this still about protecting his family, or had he become part of something bigger than himself? The streets of Berlin, once filled with the laughter of children, now echoed with the sounds of clashing ideologies. The battle for the future of Germany had spilled into the very homes of the people, and the Schmidt family was no exception. Otto had promised to protect them. But could he protect them from the chaos he had helped create? The Weimar Republic, once a beacon of hope, now stood on the edge of collapse. The streets were filled with men and women eager for change, for something more than the promises that had failed them. The government had no answers, no solutions to the turmoil that gripped the nation. In this moment of crisis, the radical groups that Otto had once seen as fringe movements were becoming the true power. For Otto, the questions were now unavoidable. Had he chosen the right side? Was the power he had sought worth the sacrifice of everything he had once believed in? He stood at the center of a movement that was growing stronger by the day. But could he truly protect his family from the storm he had joined? The battle was no longer just in the streets. It was inside Otto's heart. He had made his decision. But the question now was, what would he sacrifice to maintain the power he had chosen? Could Otto remain the protector of his family in this new world, or would his choices tear them apart? The streets of Berlin were no longer a place of hope. They were a battleground. The fascist movement had gained strength, but so had the forces that fought against them. For Otto, every step he took now felt like walking on the edge of a knife. What was once a choice between two extremes had become a question of survival, and his family's survival was now at stake. Anna's fear had always been quiet, but now it was a scream in her heart. She couldn't understand how Otto had become part of something so destructive, so unpredictable. Their family, once built on a foundation of trust and love, was now standing at the edge of something unrecognizable. Otto knew the time for questioning was over. The streets had become the battlefield of ideas, and the choice to be part of one group over another was no longer an option. He had chosen his side, and the world around him was unraveling. But could Otto live with the consequences of his decision? Could his family ever forgive him for the path he had taken? The rally roared around him, a sea of voices calling for a future he was now part of. But Otto couldn't silence the voice in his mind, the voice that asked him whether his decisions had led them here, into this chaos. Was it too late to turn back? Or had he already crossed a line from which there was no return? The silence in their home was louder than any rally. Anna and Otto had both seen the world change, but now it was their turn. The future they had once imagined, of safety, stability, and peace, was now a distant memory. The power Otto had sought to protect his family had come at a price that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Otto Schmidt stood on the edge of everything, his family, his future, his very soul. The decision was no longer just political. It was existential. Could he protect his family through power? Or had he become part of a movement that would destroy them all? The weight of his choice would follow him forever. The family Anna had known, the one built on love, trust, and shared dreams, was now slipping through her fingers. Otto had made his choice, and with it, he had chosen a future for them that was no longer certain. The man she had married was becoming a stranger, and the path he walked was leading them further into a world of shadows. Otto had risen quickly through the ranks of the movement, but the price of his newfound power was becoming clear. The movement promised a new future for Germany, but it came at a cost: the loss of personal freedom, the suppression of opposition, and the increasing pressure to choose loyalty over morality. The crowds cheered, but Otto felt a growing unease inside him. Was this really the future Germany needed? The streets had become war zones. The promise of peace was long forgotten. The violence that Otto had once dismissed as distant threats was now at his doorstep. The world he had chosen was no longer a safe place for his family. His decisions had drawn them into a fight that had no end in sight. Was this the future Otto had envisioned, or had he led them straight into the hard destruction? Anna had once believed in Otto. She had trusted him to lead their family into a better future. But now, she could no longer ignore the dangerous path he had chosen. The streets outside, once filled with promise, were now filled with violence and hate. Her family was being torn apart by the very ideology Otto had embraced. Could she save them, or had Otto already made it too late? Emil and Greta had witnessed the changes in their home, but it was only now that they truly understood what was at stake. Their childhoods, once filled with innocence, were being replaced with a harsh reality. Their father had chosen a path that would affect them all, and now, the cost of Otto's decisions was becoming clear. The family was caught between a father's ambition and a mother's fear, and they were unsure which side would win. Otto had come so far, but at what cost? The world around him had changed, and so had he. He had chosen power, but the price was becoming too great to ignore. Could he live with the consequences of his actions? Could he still protect his family while standing at the heart of a growing political storm? The choice was no longer just his own. It was a family's, and they had no say in the matter. The man, who had once sought peace and security, was now drowning in the weight of his own choices. Otto had walked too far into the storm, and he couldn't see a way out. Carl's words echoed in his mind. This is your moment to rise. But the power Otto had fought for was no longer a promise. It was a chain, dragging him further from the family he swore to protect. Anna's voice was no longer one of pleading, but of a woman who had lost faith in the man she had once loved, the man she had hoped would lead them into a better future. Now, she could only watch as Otto stood on the edge of a decision that would redefine them all. The family they once had, the future they once dreamed of, was slipping away piece by piece. Otto had made his choice. He had chosen the path of power, believing it would save his family. But in the silence of the rally, he realized something. The peace he sought didn't exist in the crowds cheering around him. It existed in the quiet moments at home with his family. The cost of power was more than he could have ever imagined. And now, there was no turning back. The world outside had become a battleground for ideologies, and Otto had stepped into the storm. The future of his family, of Germany, was now forever intertwined with the choices he had made. Was the price of survival worth the cost of everything they had lost? And as the storm of politics raged on, the Schmidt family would have to live with the consequences of a decision made in the name of survival, in the name of power, and in the name of a future they could never fully control. Otto Schmidt had chosen his path, but the true cost of that choice was only just beginning to reveal itself. For the Schmidt family, the war was not over. The battle for their soul had only just begun. And as they marched into an uncertain future, they would have to decide, could they survive the storm that was about to consume them?